Good day, good night. CFR Network, CFR News, Shalom Balance, Paradise, Righteousness, All Niha, Ola, all of those universal greetings. We're there in the lab. We're going to get into this reasonability, bills, break that down, equal stand, overstand, understand, and all those things there, man. Welcome to the broadcast tower. What do you do, sibling?
Yeah, true peace. Oh, I'm glad back in here again under 36 hours. Yeah, this is gonna be a nice one. It's like I said, this one, like you said, reasonability is definitely gonna be the topic of reasonability, but we're gonna break this down into I'm gonna deal with racism as a fact of nature, one-sided racism and equal racism, and how we can utilize equal racism to solve the problems we've been having since we've been forced into mankind's ways of life and their locations. So this is a worldwide do-it-yourself solution conversation that we finna have. It's not that deep. It's about, like I said, reasonability is something that people just have to have, and we just speak accordingly, and then I bring out certain examples, and then we'll go from there. So
sounds like a plan, sibling. Sounds like a plan.
All right.
So where you want to set this stage? Where are we going to set the stage? As you say, this applies to everybody. Really.
This will address all of the problems that the African race has worldwide with other races, because our science is an expansive science, a science of all the worlds, so it can be applied to any way you go into the universe. So this the only science that makes this claim. So what it's going to do is not just we have an issue with the white race. Noon tells us that mankind as a whole, any other race that doesn't have kinky hair, is the opposite of the African race. And the Caucasian is just the crowning piece of the extreme. And so if you go back and study our what's the word I'm looking for? Interactions with other races. I'll give you a good example. People give Thutmose in Africa props as being a great pharaoh. And that's Thutmose 1, 2, and 3. But if you do the research, like I told you, Thutmose and them is not African. They invaded. So they settled down in Africa for a few dynasties, but they was not African. And it's a story where, and I'm just remember off the top of my head, I have to go and be able to dig that up, where Thutmose went down, I think, into Sudan, and he was fighting with some of the Sudanese pharaoh down there, and they eventually got the best of him. And he took that African pharaoh and put him on the front of his ship and cut his head off and flew and rolled down the Nile with that.
I remember that story.
You see?
Yes.
So
yeah.
If so that's the Phoenician, or what you would call the modern day, Hindu people, and the Phoenicians and the Arabs. All of them is Phoenicians. The Arabs are different groups, but when you go back further, every race beyond 6,000 years ago was black. The Caucasian was the only first albino born that didn't have melanin, and then they mixed in down over time, and they got a type of color or type of melanin mixed in. So besides that, so the Arabs, they're in their original form, their parent race in Africa did that to an African king. So we have to be very careful and understand. So all that comes from racism, all of it. So,
and Sudan would have been historically Nubia, right?
yes. So when they go back and read that, I forgot which Thutmose that done that. But if you go back, and I think it was the third Thutmose, because that's the one they call the Napoleon of Egypt. But he was before Napoleon. Napoleon them and all of the military today studied what Thutmose III did, because he was a military pharaoh. He was very strategic. So he put the hurt on black people, African black people. When you study, when you see them, when they tell you the stories that he went over here, he set up shop, he did this, a lot of our people are not aware that he wasn't African. He was black, but he wasn't African.
You bring up a good point, because people, depending on what levels they are, when they start to study this information, that they think that continents, and when we're talking about Kemet or Egypt as it's known now, they just picture everyone as a Melanite, and everyone had woolly hair and big noses and big lips and all them things.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're not thinking of that was the majority, but there were subdivisions outside of that, you know what I mean? And also within that melanated race, the African race, there are still again subdivisions within that, tribes, etc. So
I give you a good one before we go and jump into the thing. I see people all the time on the line. I got a Instagram friend of mine, Trucker, and sometimes Trucker post stuff about, he'll say he'll show a picture of Caucasians wearing Egyptian stuff and be like, this is what they say was going on, but this is what really was. And he have an old picture of African pharaohs, or like they fake it. And I keep telling him Caucasian people was in Egypt. He like, nah, yes it was. If you go back to in the 15th dynasty, they call them the Hyksos, those the Jews, the Canaanites. They invaded. And they was there from the 15th dynasty all the way up to the 18th. And that's when the Thutmose, they was there from Thutmose the first, second, and third. And the third Thutmose is the one that kicked them back out to Asia. And they took Thutmose's last name, Mos, and they created the Moses story around that. And made it look like Thutmose was their savior that got them out of Egypt. No, that was y'all enemy. Even though the Caucasian or the Jewish people, all of them in general, came out of the Phoenician. They just left to the Asian Islands. I told you in the last episode, went to Europe, came back through the Asian Islands, went to Asia, and then they came back down into Africa. And then they settled in. The 15th dynasty, that's when they started it. And his name was Apep. Some say Ipep, and some say Apepi, and then Apophis. And it's the 15th dynasty. That's when the Jew, as the Hyksos or the Shepherd Kings, came in and settled in. Because they said that the 14th dynasty disintegrated and it was nothing there. And that's why they came in and just settled in. They say that the scientists say space absorbs a vacuum. So that means anytime you move something out of its place, something else is going to come and fill it up. So they came in as the 15th dynasty, and 1 plus 5 is what? 6. 6 is their number, but the half of 6 is 3. But that's where the 15th dynasty, they started with that. And they was there, like I told you, for a couple hundred years. They learned the Memphite theology, and they got all their science from the Phoenicians, who got it from us, the Ethiopians. So we passed all that stuff down. And that's how, the Jews got their religion. Originally, the Jews, that's why they have the star on their book to represent a sun. That means they got their sun knowledge from dog people. And eventually, they turned it into the moon wave, which is Judaism. It turned into moon worship, but that's a whole nother level. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. So let's jump straight into this, sibling. Let's jump straight into this here, Bill.
All right, let me open up the first thing we're gonna deal with. There it is.
And just for reference, Akhenaten as well, who's a very famous Pharaoh. He was a Phoenician as well, right?
Yeah, he wasn't African. And that's what I'm saying. These are the issues that we have because our people just throwing Africa on everything. They just because you was there, they don't make you African. That's like saying because you forward a couple of years from now, and they talk about somebody. They talk about say Malcolm or somebody, and like America. If you look at the history, America was set up by white people, but then you got people who live here who was classified as Americans.
Exactly.
They be like, oh yeah, I remember Malcolm X. Yeah, he was an American, and people think that that means he was Caucasian. No. That's you. Now you talking about an American, and it's not a nationality. Even though some people use that, so you got Caucasian, and they call over here the Americas. So you could be an American by location if you want to be dealing with as far as location wise. But then you have nationality for them because they named it in the Spanish and all, and there's a bunch of arguments about that. But then you got American by location. So I'm an American by location. My nationality or my blood lineage runs back to the motherland. Whatever name people want to argue, I really don't care about that. You can say more, you can say all of that. But the point of the matter is, for mundane purposes, I'm an American. If I go overseas and some group of people arrest me or kidnap me, they're going to refer to you as America because that's where you come from. At that point, they're not gonna go into your ancestry. And who's gonna be sitting over here arguing with a damn terrorist talking about I'm from a Kubilan by national? Who cares about that? They're gonna say you from America, the devil, the beast, whatever, and we finna do whatever. They don't care about that. And even if they had a little sense, say so. If you all this, that, and the third, why are you still over there? This just dumbness, man. So I can't deal, man. Hold on. Let me share my screen real quick.
Yeah, man.
All right, just let me know if you can see it.
Yes, indeed.
All right, I'm finna click. This is on our website. I just go ahead and it'd be easier to work with instead of just clicking through all my PDFs.
Yeah.
All right, so.
Keep it simple and plain for these for the squad tuning them and listeners. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Can you see it?
Yeah, man.
All right, this is one of Afro Unu's books that he wrote, and this is called Moonset Sunrise. The reason why he called that because the moon cycle that the Caucasian was ruling in ended in February 5th, 1962, and sunrise meaning the sun cycle is rising and darker people is going to rise up, and the smack circle of all the space, matter, and time is now traveling forward and up. So that's why he named it Moonset, meaning the end of religion and all that stuff. All right, so we're going to go into is racism a fact of life, right? Or is it caused by other nature of man motives? So we're going to go to that first so we can equal stand the topic, because we need to get into that first. Once we understand is this what the question is being asked, then we'll go from there. All right, so number 29, it says racism a fact of life or by nature, or is it caused by other nature of man motives? So anytime you want to jump in, just you could do so.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah.
All right, listen to reason. The answer to this question is both, because the answer depends on what kind of racism the person has in mind. This is very important. All right. The fact that nature produced various human races who look different and have different nature suggests racism, which is simply the natural honor, support, and respect a person has for his or her own kind, while recognizing and respecting the natural rights of other people of ethnic races to do the same. That's positive racism. Okay. So that's that. We just want to frame this piece by piece, and this is but we're not seeing that in America and abroad. All right. There's nothing wrong with equal racism, because racism exists by nature. In fact, whether we like it or not, it is one-sided racism that is diabolical and wrong, and will eventually destroy those who promulgate, preach it, and practice it.
So siblings,
Go ahead.
so to try and put some context, or to try and make it even more simple and plain, equal racism is in essence you having love and pride for yourself, right?
Right, and your kind.
Yes.
And while recognizing other races to do the
Yes.
same. That's
Yes.
equal racism. That's it. But that's the problem that we're having. I had a conversation earlier where I was talking to somebody about when you have white supremacy, that's different. That's not equal racism in the positive. This them having honor and all that for themselves, but what they're doing is barbarianism. And to say you're supreme in the doctrine and the action, that's why he says racism, he said it depends on what kind of racism the person has in mind. So if you having a self-honor respect racism of yourself and kind while respecting others, that's different. But when you say supremacist, that means y'all have an ideology that goes around taking over, absorbing other people's ideas and lands, and overlooking that if y'all were supreme from the origin, none of that would have to be taking place. You wouldn't have to do that. It's like Michael Jordan. If Michael Jordan didn't have the talent he had to do all types of mess to get his position, you can never say he was the GOAT, but he came in naturally like that. That's what it means. So a black supremacist is a misnomer, and it's a corrupt, and it's the opposite of white supremacist. A black supremacist is a white supremacist opposite, but doesn't have the accomplishments that the white supremacists preach about, meaning taking other countries and putting people in slavery. Black supremacy is what they did was they allowed these people who got away from Marcus Garvey's message and turned and again went from Marcus Garvey to Elijah Muhammad being influenced by the Japanese militia is what allowed them to militarize black pride and black honor and respect of themselves, and then it just kept getting worse and worse all the way down to the Black Panthers, and now it became a paramilitary type doctrine. You understand? So black supremacy is no such thing as that. It's Pan-Africanism, or you just having respect for your own kind and self, and respect while respecting other people. White supremacy is basically just a construct created for people who don't respect other races, and you understand? So I don't use the term black supremacy because that's a misnomer and it's falsified. All right. So it is one-sided racism that is diabolical and wrong, and will eventually destroy those who promulgate it, preach it, and practice it. Those transgressors of nature's laws will be destroyed by the laws of nature and nature's processes of balancing off individuals, societies of individuals, nations of individuals, and races of individuals. Let it be remembered also. Let it be. So it's telling you that nature itself is going, and nature is all space, matter, and time. So nature is going to use a whole bunch of different things to get rid of this. So we're going to move forward. All right, listen to reason. A one-sided racist believes that he or she is someone special by divinity or greater mentality or both, and is thereby a privileged person over other people of other racial posterities. And it is true that this position may exist, and look what he got, temporarily in all bold and capital letters.
In capitals, yeah.
Right? Temporarily, like it already has, because it is also true that there are spirit beings who aid and abet one-sided racism, and this activity was a feature of the moon cycle, the cycle of forgiveness and mercy and no holds barred. It is likewise true that if the ruling spirit beings of our planet Earth favor a particular group, nation, or race of people, those people favored will surpass others in their endeavors, mentally, spiritually, and economically during the time of their favorite dominion, because spirit beings are programmers and controllers of persons, places, and things. Then too, evolution itself shows favoritism in its process of change in matter for worse. Therefore, the race of people best of at the beginning of evolution, right, will indeed be worse at the end of evolution, which is our race. We was in the beginning of evolution. So, like the Bible says, the first should be last and the last should be first. So we was first, and over millions of years, other races came up and switched positions, and now we are at the bottom. All right? History bears this out. And that ethnic race is definitely the Ethiopian race, and this means that negative evolutionary forces of nature automatically created enemies of the African race by nature. Let it be remembered always and let it be known. Alright, listen to reason. Therefore, the answer to the question is racism a fact of life by nature, or is it caused by other nature of man motives? Follows the answer is both. If a person believes in one-sided racism, the God whom he or she believes in supports that position, and the evil person may also be driven by hate and the powers of the spirit dead called necromancy that emanates from the God whom he or she believes in. Moreover, the one-sided racist may be driven not only by hate and necromancy, powers of the dead, but also by need, greed, or desire for material wealth and easy living, plus an oppressive nature which is indicative and typical of the spirit dead upon those they disfavor or dislike. The foregoing correct information constitutes the evil religious spell Caucasians sometimes tell members of the Ethiopian race that they are cursed with. And it is not the sun, black skin, and kinky hair, because these are qualities of superiority in human beings. But what is surely but unfortunately missing for members of the Ethiopian race, which will make us equal with members of other race, is what? Our sound right reasonability. This is what Nine Mind Nupu is. And I'm glad you titled it Reasonability, because this is what we're missing, okay? And also, before we jump further, people got to realize, like he said, if a person believes in one side of race and the God whom he or she believes in supports that position. So when you dealing with religion, right? Christians or the Judeo-Christians in this country, they teach, their whole thing is, we need to be equal. They talk about equal racism. They don't call it that. They just saying equality for everybody here. But they call themselves Christians. In their book called The Jews, the Chosen People, that's racism. Mm-hmm. That's not equality. And if you read the Bible in the Old Testament, it always talk about the children of Israel and they the favorite of God and all this stuff like that. So their book programs them to believe that they're special. This is why they over there and took that part of Africa, calling it Israel. You see? So these things is not, your God doesn't believe in equality. And so your book doesn't either. And this is why the laws that mankind makes don't never show equality either. It's not.
Let me go back to the necromancy.
Okay.
Is that as it is? So communicating with the dead, basically?
Yes, because once the suns, 18 million years ago, noon science teaches us that the suns scientifically died. It's called a scientific death. It means that all of the chemicals that was at their highest point when our ancestors were on the planet, right? It was life-giving energies, what we call 9 ether. I told you I'm writing a book on it. 9 ether and 6 ether. 6 ether is the chemicals of death, life, but it's like the sun represent life, but it also gives off energy that can kill you. So the sun is not totally just life, and it's not harmful. It's harmful. But over 18 million years ago, the sun was emitting 9 ether energies that produced life and kept making sure our ancestors lived for millions of years until that energy hit its peak. and then it eventually lost its ability to maintain that lifestyle of living for everything, the planets, the moons, and all those life forms at that time. And then 6 ether came in, what they called a Cambrian explosion. That's when all the suns had an explosion, and it was like nuclear fallout, as the 9-ball count says. And that is they call that in science evolutionary radiation. And so as those chemicals and like the hydrogen and helium became more unstable, and then they started creating all these other elements on the periodic chart. And those charts, and the further it got away from hydrogen and helium and oxygen, it kept adding more and more negative elements or atoms to each element. The elements started to change, and then it just created, and they start getting heavier and heavier and more unstable and unstable. So that's, go ahead.
So Siblin, was they so back in the time where the 9 ether was being emitted,
right,
were our ancestors living for the amounts of times which is written in the Bible, like 900 years?
No, we was living that long about 6,000 years ago. Our ancestors in the 9 ether form, they was living for millions of years, and they didn't have sex. The earth was producing them from her 9 ether clay, like eggs, and she was sending the eggs up through Lake Victoria, and then they would come out on the banks of the Nile, and then the sun heat would hit them, and then they would hatch out the eggs. This is what what came first, the chicken or the egg? Everything was an egg form or formula.
So Lake Victoria, that's South Africa, right?
Yeah, that's in Africa. Mm-hmm. That's like it's on the equator. Lake Victoria. So we got a whole build, me and Anu did, dealing with that, proving scientifically that's where the ancestors came from. So now go ahead.
I think I've heard someone else say that the cradle of civilization is South Africa. They didn't go into Lake Victoria, though.
Yeah, Lake Victoria is a vagina, and it goes all the way down to the Earth's 6 ether and 9 ether clay. So that's the womb of Mother Earth for the African race. Now the second womb she has is on the equator on Indonesia. That's where the mankind races came from. Like the ancestors, like the gibbon monkey and certain apes and stuff come from down there. So that's a whole nother conversation too.
Yeah. So let's not divert too.
Yeah, you're right. So anyway, 6 ether, what the sun is producing, called gamma radiation today in mundane science, that emits sun spirits that are in the upper atmosphere of the planet. That's what they emanate from. They're more powerful than the spirits that the earth emanates, and more powerful than what the moon emanates. But when the cycles come in, then the cycle will favor the moon and earth spirits and then suppress the sun spirits until at their time. It's like an administration coming out and another one coming in, but it happens over 6,000 year periods. Not like 4 years over here and 8 years in other countries. It's thousands of years. So the sun cycle administration been coming in since February 5th, 1962. So now they're changing out the moon administration. And what's left for the moon administration is the elite, the Illuminati, the deep state. Those are the moon administration. So they have to be killed and removed and replaced. So that's one of the things that's taking place, that people are hearing all these whispers about what Trump and them is doing and all these other people. They talk about these extraterrestrials assisting behind the scenes. So there's a whole lot of other things going on. But necromancy, scientifically, is just the spirits, the energy that these orbs are producing are death energies. And human beings, only way you can contact them in the form of trying to get them to do something for you is where all these occult stuff come into place, and these spirits require blood from human beings because the 9 ether energy used to provide enough sustenance for them.
Yes.
And 6 ether doesn't provide. 9 ether is the combination of all existing gases. And all existing gases together is what? Hydrogen. That's all of them into one. And then hydrogen broke into helium, then helium broke into, you see what I'm saying? So 6 ether is less gases combination than 9 ether. And so those planets and orbs all emit different forms of these chemicals, and they're deadly. The sun is more life-giving than the earth, and the earth is more life-giving than the moon. But all three emanate deadly gases, and the sun has more intelligent spirits than the earth, and the earth have more intelligent spirits than the moon. And so the spirits that most people are playing with are those top spirits all from all 3 orbs, and then they have sub spirits, and then that's how it works. So when you see all these people around the world, billionaires, trillionaires, or somebody come out the gate and go on YouTube and just do something crazy, and they got millions of views, and all of a sudden the doors start lining up for them out of nowhere, that's because the spirits is favoring this person. That's why. But when they get inside the deep underground worlds, that's necromancy. That's what that is, and that's what they're not calling it. So it's necromancy that, and when you already know about the occult, they're killing people and doing these things because the spirits require that. That's part of the bottom half rule. So,
okay.
All right. So it said the Ethiopian race will make us equal with members of other human races is our sound right reasonability. And Nupu, who is sound right reason, also called non-reason, is now returning from the centers of the universe orbs like the sun, earth, and moon in its positiveness in the form of positive atmosphere, right? That means all 7 layers of the atmosphere. And non-mentality. Let it be remembered, always let it be known. Listen to reason. The preceding correct information about evil spells and curses is the negative news, but the nice news, 9 and positive news is this. Now that the moon cycle marking the end of the Virgo cycle is over, and the sun cycle marking the beginning of the Libra cycle is starting, it is true that persons, places, and things by laws of nature have begun to balance off and balance out for better in the revolution cycle rather than for worse as it was in the evolution cycle. And the upward better balanced trend will indeed continue indefinitely. That is to say, until the Ethiopian race reaches tip top of the existence circle again in the persons of the flesh and blood gods and goddesses from whom the African race surely descended from. Let it be remembered, always let it be known. Listen to reason. While on race relations, let this scientist of non-knowledge inject this note. When an ethnic race is an underling to other human races, the women of that oppressed race be used as sexual dumping grounds by any male who calls himself a human being. This social evil is not only degrading to the females of the race, but the race as a whole, and in the case of the Ethiopian race, it destroys the purity, dignity, and respect for our race. For example, it has been said that if a Caucasian person has the equivalent of 1 drop of African race blood in his or her veins, that person is not Caucasian and will not be accepted as a member of the Caucasian race. This means that whatever it be, a black man and a Caucasian woman or a white man and black woman, their offspring will have to go for black because he or she, if background is known, would not be accepted in the Caucasian race, no matter how Caucasian the mixed offspring might look. This is destruction or genocide of the ethnic race by miscegenation because the racially mixed person will be forced to become a member of the Ethiopian race by one-sided rejection by the Caucasian race and one-sided exception by the Ethiopian race. Let it be remembered always and let it be known. Listen to reason. We Ethiopian race males must teach our women and younger females to be sexual dumping grounds neither for Caucasian men nor men of other ethnic races, and teach them why it is not in the best interest of the African race, mentally, spiritually, morally, and physically, and we Ethiopian race males must guide them by setting examples for them, as well as educating them on the wrongness of miscegenation and interracial mixing sexually. The sexual dumping of our beautiful black race must stop and desist if we black people of African descent are to survive as a race with dignity and definite identity, which is our kinky hair and our sunshiny black skin, who we are in our purity. The practice of one-sided and hate-mongering racism is wrong, evil, and will be destroyed by the laws of nature in that balancing process for better standards of living now that the Libra cycle for liberation and justice are here enacted. Let it be remembered always and let it be known. So that in itself was a lot to unpack, but this is why people going to have to come back, take notes, look up the words that I'm saying, look into your world, because again, we're seeing we're seeing that in both races, all races, there's a group of people who always is not with race mixing, which is how you keep your race pure. But the negative part of it is how it's carried out and how people will kill each other. They'll kill a daughter or kill the son or kill a child. That's the negative forces of evolution. That's called descending reasonability. What
yes,
Nupu,
for some strange reason they call it honor killing.
Right, because because first of all, the reason why they do that, because what people don't realize, genetically you're killing a portion of your offspring, because the mixing and the difference of the genes. And you got a lot of times the doctors gonna tell you, when, like I think Serena Williams went through that, when these people have babies with the opposite sex, the blood her body takes the Caucasian semen as an enemy and it attacks it. And then when it mixes and become a child, that's when they start having these problems with these mixed babies. They don't like to tell y'all that, but that's what they call miscegenation or genetic suicide. That's all it is. And so some people, again, because reasonability has been lost, people respond in the wrong way. But 9 science is telling us you have to teach. In order way people can know that mixing their children, mixing their seed with the opposite, you have to be scientific. A lot of that knowledge has been kept away and not been filtered into everyday education from young, is because a certain group of, like the Caucasians, like the Rockefellers and all of them people who took control of the educational system, and they made the information edited to how they wanted. But imagine if everybody had these basic foundation of information growing up, and then you didn't set schools up to mix different races, nor you mix male and female. You keep it all in nature. And the Moon Sign tell you that when you set up schools, African people, the children should not, females should be in females, males should be in males, so they can learn to not be distracted. And then you teach them how to take care of themselves, and then if they want to get married, around 12 and 13, then they can get married, and then everything be set up. Things are not that way. And so when you take out the knowledge and you force people together, and you talk about necromancy, this is another reason why people keep doing the same thing over and over. This is why every time they do something to us, we run, and it's either forgiveness or mercy. When that brother, the black man, I can't think of his name, with a white cop in Texas busting his apartment, talking about she thought she was in her apartment and killed him. Right?
Oh, yes.
But really it came out that they was messing with each other, because she stayed underneath him. It came out they was messing with each other. I even seen a video footage of him and her at some friend's crib over there. And it was just sex to him. And his brother was in the courtroom, wanted to hug her and have mercy, and the black judge,
yeah, and the family and all of
right,
that shit.
and the judge came down and hugged her and gave her a Bible. That's part of mercy and forgiveness, and that's the negative spells and curses that religion has put on us. This is why out of,
was it Boheme or something like that? Boheme something.
I can't remember what, but it was a big case. Like this happened like last year sometime. Maybe a year before that, but I think the case.
Probably, I think 18, 19 or something like that.
Right, and then the case showed up, I think, early last year or maybe late 2019. But yeah, so you have these cases. Even every time they do something to us, we immediately, because of religion, mercy and forgiveness. But then that's what religion does. But then 6 Ether will click the switch on crazy and then have us running out there with guns getting killed. So it's a lot that we have to learn. But necromancy is the real reason. And necromancy is in all religion. Because if you sitting here worshiping a God you can't see, you don't even know that spirit God is scientifically dead. And if you honoring whatever leader that you following in your religion, those people either, if they were real, they're dead. And if you sit here calling on Mary and you hitting the beads and you going into that's necromancy. It's not the pure necromancy where people actually, dress up and they draw the symbols on the floor and drink the blood and all that. They're not that extreme, but religions is, I told you, the nicer side of the occult. That most people in these religions have no idea that the flip side of what they're hating on, y'all in the same thing, different side of the same coin. So a Christian can get mad at a devil worshipful Satanist, but y'all worshiping the same force. Don't realize it. Let me see.
Amber Geiger is where we talking about.
Yeah, that's her name.
And Boheme Jane or John.
Yeah, what's her name again?
Amber Geiger.
Right, Amber Geiger. Yep, that's it. Let me see here. You can still see my screen?
Yeah, man.
All right. You seen when I clicked off?
Yeah.
Okay, let me go to this other book. All right, go back. I think it's. Anything else you wanted to say before we jump into the next one?
I think you laid it out. I think it's the information's there. It's not hard to digest and to get. It's just, I guess it's the language which is a little bit different. Equal racism and stuff. People think have got. They look at the negative side of it.
Right, and they don't know what it is. But when they say in America about equality, that's what they're saying. But equality has to have other things in it. You can't say equality, but then both sides are engaging in non-equal things. When you talk about equality all around, it's the same thing when you go and put an application over here, they say, it's equal opportunity. That's not true, because if you got a family that they got their warners up on you already with education and people that work there and people can put you on, that's not equal. I can't walk into and say, you know what, I want to go for being the CEO and the schools and everything. I didn't come from no background that put me in a trajectory for that. Even if I say, I want to be a CEO, I got to start from ground zero. I'll never make it there. So the fact that they have a direction, you have to start from the bottom to go up. And as you go up, it's a pyramid. It's no equality in a pyramid. So these are logos, which is a form of 6 ether and noon science. So these words have powers, and this is why people are confused. All right, so now we finna get into a little history of I hate this damn word again. Protestantism, right? So we can get an understanding of America's base situation. And for those who don't know, capitalism came from Protestantism, if you didn't know that. And Protestantism is because capitalism is based upon if you work hard, you can get paid if you grind. And the Protestantism, what they took the quote when they said God told Adam he's going because he did wrong, he was gonna have to work by the sweat of his brow. And so the original people, when you go into Protestantism, they tell you that they believe that if they work hard like Adam, they'll be to get into heaven if they work hard all their life. And that's what capitalism was born from that. And Protestantism is a form of Catholicism. And Catholicism is basically a form of imperialism, because before the Pope became this religious figure, the Pope was a king. The Pope ran everything. Yes. So Protestantism is where capitalism come from. So people are practicing Protestantism, which is a form of Catholicism, which is basically Christianity. So that's what capitalism is. So this is another reason why you see America set up the way it's set up. And this is why people to this day, I gotta grind, I gotta get it, I gotta eat. They all saying the same thing. All you gotta do is go look up the basic tenets of Protestantism in your own, in your own private time. You're gonna see where capitalism come from. And if you can look it up, capitalism came from Protestantism. You're like, oh man, this is ridiculous. So we don't even know the history of what we're doing. So a lot of people don't understand that. You got a lot of hotep hustling in the black community who know all these languages and all this history, don't realize you Egypt and Kemet in Africa, but you're practicing a form of Catholicism. So you'll never unite with your people, because the system is based upon a religious belief that they can't even prove that Adam and Eve even existed. But you created a financial system based off of a religious story of somebody who did something wrong and got kicked out. And if he worked hard, he can get back into the place he cheated and got kicked out. So that's how capitalism is. And it's based upon a bunch of people. If I got the bread, I can get things done.
Yeah. Or I can have access to this
right. I'm trying to get into heaven. And this is what this is. Heaven on earth. Because that's what Protestantism is. They believe they work hard, they can get heaven on earth. So that's why you see the rich and the famous that's really into capitalism. As soon as they get bread, people start showing off, and yeah, I'm living good, and I'm Adam back into the garden, and you on the outside living off of dirt. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what you're dealing with. All right, so let's get into it. Protestant means one who protests, meaning religious. One who protests the established order, belief, or decorum or both. This is what black people doing too. Every time you get killed, y'all going to the streets protesting. So you still following a form of Catholicism. This is why I wanted to go here, because this is very important. Right? The order of belief and decorum for the time. 1620 AD, place Europe, in which reference is now made as Catholicism. The etymology meaning of the words Catholicism and pantheism are the same, in the sense that they both refer to the statue of a huge cat with a king's head at Giza. Notice the word cat in Catholicism.
Yes.
Okay? The huge cat, called the Sphinx at Giza, Egypt, symbolized the Lion of Judah, that is Jupiter, also called Ra and Zeus. Remember, this goes back to Ra and Zeus is the sun, right? So now we know what capitalism is. As soon as you get paid, you want to start what? Shining. Back to the sun again. I'm blinging. This is you see? So so even though they started capitalism, it still runs back to Egypt or Kemet. But this is Caucasian style. It's not how we did it back then, in a sense. It was a little different. All right? The huge cat called the Sphinx at Giza, Egypt, symbolized the Lion of Judah, that is Jupiter, also called Ra and Zeus. Remember, all Greek and Roman gods were originally Phoenician Hindu gods. Literally, the word Catholic means cat holy or holy cat. Of course, Catholicism and Protestantism And there are many branches and denominations of all Christianity called Christendom, the Caucasians' spiritual world. According to history, Martin Luther, a German monk, and John Calvin, a French reformer, were two of the leaders who spearheaded the break from Catholicism called the Reformation. Out of the Reformation movement came Protestantism, which represented looser religious practices and less religious discipline. The want for less religious discipline is one of the main causes of the Reformation in Germany, France, England, and other European countries, because less strictness in religious practice meant that there could be a separation of church, the national religion of a country, and state, the government of a country. Thereby, under Protestantism, the national religion of a country could pretend to represent one thing while the government of that same country represented another thing, and this has opened the way to greater deception and hoodwinking by Christian rulers, that is Caucasian rulers. And this is what you're going on right now in America and other places. They want to separate church and state, right? But when they go in, they put their hand on the Bible and say, I, such and such, be the president of the United States. That's foolishness, because right now, that's what the Democrats and Republicans are doing. Soon as something come up, the other side go against the other one. So that's a form of what? Protesting. That's all they still practicing, Protestantism, calling it Democrats and Republicans. That's the same foolishness. All right?
Lutheranism,
all of that.
And Calvinism.
Mm-hmm. All the same come from that. All right, for instance, if there were no separation of church and state in the United States, the oppressed would know that it is the oppressor's religion and the spirit forces thereof helping the oppressor to keep the oppressed ignorant and captive, even more so than the oppressor's politics and other systems, because the policy of the state would openly be policy of the church and vice versa. But the separation scheme helps to keep the oppressed masses deceived about the enmity or hatred of the slave master's guard against the captives. However, in recent years, it has been made very clear that the slave master religion is as racist as his politics and other parts of his oppressive system. It should be pointed out right here, however, there's nothing wrong with right racism. In fact, everything is right with it. Right racism preserves the racist. There is no other way to preserve purity of the racist but by right racism. Let me make this clear. Afro-Un wrote this under the name Amnuba Reakata in 1968. So this the solution been written. All right. The Caucasian practice is wrong race. Go ahead.
What would you say to the people who say that there's nothing wrong with mixing ethnicities or races, and that breaks the barriers down, and love is blind, is color blind, and race blind, and all that kind of stuff?
Again, they're not making no sense, because you can look into the world and ask yourself, has the world got better from race mixing? No. These are universal things. Love, first of all, is an emotion. But because in Noon Science we know that the spirit being base is in the heart of a person, and they manipulate the mind. And when the moon cycle came in, it broke down cultures that had these barriers set up. It's only in America and later on down through history in the last 6,000 years that a lot of information was removed. And they control what you thought you seen and what you thought it was, and then they use a necromancy. There is something wrong. Genetically, there's something wrong with it, because I told you, when people of different backgrounds, especially dark skin mixed with Caucasian, there's a genetic problem there. The same way mixed with other races. It's a genetic and biological scientific fact.
Well, when we look at scientifically, we're supposed to be mammals and stuff, right? So if we look at nature and the animal kingdom, we don't see that take place, right?
Right. You don't see animals mixing with a different version of itself. If you just observe them and leave them alone, they won't do that. Only certain things happen like that when their habitats are messed up and you force them into a particular situation, and then the animal has sexual urges, and then the spirit in them has urges and have to survive. So the spirit would do whatever it takes to survive. That's the only thing a spirit and a human being have in common is survival. So, but again, love is an emotion. To say love is blind, I know that's a certain type of cliche or saying they say, but love doesn't have any eyes. And I wouldn't, if we didn't stay within our race, you won't be able to maintain your image or your bloodline. That stuff is important. Only ignorant and poor people says that. When you deal with royalty and people that's in those hierarchies, they know what it's important to keep your gene pool alive. Just your gene pool.
All right, then I'm glad you brought that point up, because on a previous build, I did about Meghan Markle and Harry and all that. I made and obviously, you know, they've created a child and stuff. So the question is, we've got at least 3 or 4 historical examples of half black and half white women marry into the English royalty, and then, you know, this happened, as I say, 3 or 4 times. Like, what was the reasoning for that then? Why did they graft in somebody? Was it just to absorb power?
It means that they're losing power, because those who into that know that mixing your blood is bad. Because it's like you got all this wealth built up in your dynasties. They call that tying in the vine. And when Caucasian people were coming up and they didn't have no money, like the Jews when they settled in Lower Egypt in the 15th dynasty, they had to work their way up. And they used their women to be concubines and eventually get knocked up by a Phoenician pharaoh. And then guess what? It tied in some wealth to her when the pharaoh passed. And that's how they got up. They was using their women as sexual objects to tie in the vine. The same way if you became a famous football star or whatever, now you got millions, they immediately introduce you to a white woman. Because she get a baby with you, her money, your money going that way.
Yeah.
But in the royal world, they know better than that, because that's a whole nother level. And they kill each other off to make sure only certain people succeed them. So the fact that Meghan Markle, my bad, I'm sorry. Who was darker before what y'all see now, she didn't look like that. She was darker and she had her nose done. Her doing that's just her living out some fantasy that America didn't program her with. But the fact she was able to catch that particular Caucasian guy that's part of this family, showing there's a weakness and their dynasty is falling. But I bet you can't go to China or Saudi Arabia and pull that off. Because that's just showing that the Caucasian power structure is waning. And it's been waning for the last 59 years. This is why they're having the problem that they're having with China. And China done got one up on them with the technology. And they bullying America. They doing all this stuff and blackmailing them. All that stuff they trying is not working. The Illuminati, as far as people know, when you look at all that stuff, when they show you all these things about the Illuminati and the New World Order, aside from the extraterrestrials, you always see white people and Arabs or Phoenician people faces when you look into this so-called 1%. What race you see dominant into that? So that means that what a lot of the Caucasian people who are not into that, their biggest problem they're gonna have is realizing that y'all so-called white privilege came by way of the evil they was doing behind the scenes. They just cut y'all a little something of the pie until they tried to figure out they was going to do to go for world domination. And so that's going to be the bigger problem. And that's why I just shake my head when I see this, because they don't look at the fact that all these people y'all saying is doing all this dirt is white people. But see, when they look at the Pope, oh yeah, the Catholic Church, and they don't see race when it comes to the evil that they people are doing, that they don't follow. Not saying they support. It amazes me that they only see the Pope in the title. You don't see the skin color. How is that? When you start
outside of the skin color, sibling, what about the actions and the cover-ups of the Catholic Church, which they've been doing across the whole world in regards to their pederasty and all that kind of stuff?
But that's because it was designed for that to happen by nature, and that's why in our last conversation I told you all of the every race on earth done participated in that. It's just over time it became worse and worse, and it topped off with the white race. And once it blows, you're gonna realize that the Caucasian didn't have nothing original. He started as the last human race. He got his knowledge from the Hindus. That means all of his practices, imperialism, the Caucasian got that from the Hindus. So he set up his caste system, his racist politics and policies came from the Hindu. So, and the Hindus was already practicing, sex and stuff with Shiva and Brahma, and they in the Ligbum and all this stuff they was doing, and
Kama Sutra.
All the Kama Sutra, all that stuff, they passed that on to them. So when you start tracing back, spirits cause human beings to become homosexuals and all that stuff too. So, but they got their knowledge from the Hindus, and they got the same gods from them. And those gods transferred power over to them, and they just started practicing it more out in the open. That's why when you go to India, you see the Kama Sutra, and you can see statues of sexual positions. But then when it got to the Greeks, they had statues of, naked men and little boys and angels with their stuff out all over in America, New York. You can see it on a lot of those big buildings of law. You can see the same pedestry statues all over the United States, because that's how the bottom half of existence works. I can't place the blame on white people, say that came from them. That's a lie that the Hotep hustle of the black community keep telling everybody. They keep telling you, no, homosexuality and lesbianism and pedestry and murder and sacrificing the gods, that didn't start with white people. So that's not true. But the Catholic Church is a manifestation of what's going on in the world. They just was the one who was doing it at the peak of their civilization. It's a lot of information they just hiding. And once it come out that the Hindus is doing it in them temples, they just still, it's a lot of stuff that just hasn't hit the surface. Sumer, Africa was doing it. It's just raggedy now. But if you go back into the heyday, when they start releasing all this information that the priests of Amun-Ra and whoever else was doing all this stuff, and these gods actually was giving these people power and prestige in exchange for those type of sacrifices that everybody's blaming Hollywood for. That stuff extend back millions of years, and the spirit forces require this to exist, is what I'm telling you.
Would you say it is? I agree that there's nothing new under the sun, and
right.
Unfortunately, black folk were the first people to do anything and everything. Good and bad.
It's just it just go back so long ago that it's no real record of it on the surface. And the elite people, they got these records. That it's just we've been around so long. It's gone.
Now the question is, like today, it's everywhere,
mm-hmm.
and over 10, 15, 20 years, this is just getting more and more blatant. My question is, so back in the day, was it as blatant as
No.
known?
No.
Okay.
Only when Greece,
The Greco-Roman Empire started.
right,
Yeah.
that's when it became more flamboyant. But
Mhm.
before the white race established, like I said, you only knew that these things were going on if you was a part of these mystery systems.
Yes.
It was more cleaner, and you had to be within it to know what they were doing.
right.
That's all I'm saying, and people just need to accept that. You know.
hmm hmm
All right. So, right racism is a symptom of race pride and intelligence. Right racism is racism practiced on equal terms, and to practice racism equally, a race must have what? Equal things, beginning with equal universal knowledge. It is ironical and hypocritical that the very ones who introduced racism as we know it today to the world, and the ones who practice wrong racism to the extremes, are the very ones who tell us now that racism is diabolical. Caucasians mean that racism is diabolical and wrong when it is practiced by others toward Caucasians, because when others practice it, it means that Caucasian males would not be able to, one, abuse, misuse, rape, and ravish women of other races at will and nothing be done about it. Two, would not be able to mongrelize and leopardize, genocide by miscegenation other races. And three, would not be able to religiously spellbind and sexually stigmatize the bodies and minds of women of other races and use those women against the men of the women's own race. In other words, right racism prevents Caucasian men from using the women of a race against their men. Remember, right racism is the only way to reserve the purity of the race and keep peace amongst the races. Many darker peoples, especially Negroes, do not realize that the spirit forces that empower the Bible are more racist than most Caucasians show them to be. Protestantism made it easier for Caucasians and other races to practice wrong racism on woolly-haired people. The schisms called Protestantism caused a great influx of European heretics and jailbirds to migrate to America because Catholicism demanded too much discipline, law, and order. Soon after that influx of heretics and jailbirds from Europe, slavery started in the Americas and surrounding islands and territories thereof. In 1520 AD, the time when Martin Luther was excommunicated from the Catholic Church by Pope Leo X, Catholicism controlled the church and the state, the government of the country where it had jurisdiction. So Protestantism sprang from Catholicism in the 16th century around 1520 AD by hearsay. Catholicism is the mother of all Christendom, all Christian faiths and denominations. And this includes the Hebrew Israelites. All of it is all up under that. All right? As it exists today. Unfortunately, Protestantism provides and allows separation of church and state, and this means that the masses are allowed to do their own biblical interpretations instead of leaving interpretation to the head of the church. And also people are freer to practice their own evil wills and ways upon self and others without any real religious penalties or punishment. Nevertheless, Christianity and Judaism in all their forms and practices are religions of and for the Caucasian race, not in favor of woolly-haired people. According to the history, the Bible was not completely translated into English until around 1610 and 1611, and various English versions were produced since the first English transition. Therefore, the Bible, Old and New Testament, is nothing like the original writings which the present Bible is supposed to represent. In ancient times, laymen were not allowed to interpret spiritual writing because they would be different interpretations which would confuse the people. Different interpretation would not only be confusing but also false. The layman not knowing spiritual jargon and individual interpretation by the masses would open the way for religious profiteering, exploitation, and division. And there are other reasons why spiritual interpretation by the masses are undesirable and detrimental. Protestantism opened the way for all the foregoing detriments. The schism called Protestantism is an outlaw from Catholicism. In other words, Protestantism is a result of spiritual lawlessness against Catholicism, just as the United States of America is a result of political lawlessness against England. In ancient times, once done, spiritual writings were never altered or revised. If there was something to be added or brought up to date, it would be put at the end of the book and labeled properly as such. Altering or revising a book means that it was not right in the first place, or someone wants to deceive or mislead somebody to his own selfish way, such as the way of exploitation, oppression, and slavery, such as that which took place in America after the Protestant Reformation. In ancient times, the masses were kept up to date with current periodic writings already fully interpreted. The masses were not constantly taught about past events except as history. They were not taught to live in the past or by the past. The masses were always taught what they should say and do for their well-being as of the present, because what was all right for the past may be all wrong for the present, depending on the issues in question or at hand and the surrounding circumstances. So that's where we at. This is why the America, especially in America, everything is they stuck in the past. It's only other races still able to stay ahead of us because the spirits are still helping them, even though it trapped them in a vacuum. And this is the problem. Like when you look at Sarnetta and them, all they talk about is the past. They cannot escape. The hamster wheel is serious.
Arrested Development, sibling. It's crazy, man. I mean, them mans have got some years on me still, and it's a devolution of humankind. Mm-hmm. You know, it's disappointing. It's hella disappointing because you've got people who are just kind of waking up to the thing, and now, you know, they've stumbled across this folly, mm-hmm. and they're going to be stuck on this folly for like a couple of years before they realize shit.
Yeah, and they only realize it because it gets them nowhere. Once they see that the only thing that they do over there is argue all day, and mm-hmm. again, like the book just said, Sarnetta is only exploiting them, and he's getting YouTube dollars from that. It's a recycling of exploitation. And like I said, if I was in that particular mode, which I suggested this many times, is that if you're going to have debates, y'all should debate a topic, and once it's been proven and debunked, you should never go back there again. But they keep revisiting the same answer topics. But that means because it's for show and it's for entertainment. And whoever's making money, that's all they're doing it for. That's it.
People to the highest, and look, we're not here to be playing around, man. This is not the time, the Gregorian year of 2021, to be messing about, keep laughing and shit.
Especially
ain't nothing wrong with having fun and stuff.
Right, especially when you know that you know that the people in the government is trying to take you out, and when you know that's the sad part that gets on my nerves. I can't. That it's just it's a sad thing, man. Hold on, this book 1 page 104. Okay, I think I'm in the wrong book. I think I am.
If you can't apply the information to your life and make your life better right here, right now, what's it for? What's the purpose?
And they don't realize that until it's too late. And that's the thing. And we in that, we get there. I'm telling you, man, we know these things, but again, this is what the people want. They like to play these games until it's not funny no more.
Until they're still there,
mm-hmm.
You know, still living the same way, still doing the same thing, you know. And X amount of years have gone by. It's like, mm-hmm. Come on, man.
And now we down to the rubber. You know,
this is it.
It's you know, Sarnetta and Harlem was used by the negative forces of nature to buy people's time of misdirection, and the politics is where the racist stuff is taking place. With all this extra stuff that's going on, all this, the racism is the foundation of why all of this stuff is happening to different people of the planet. It all comes down to this. Now here is a good one here. All right, so listen to reason. While we're on the subject of human races and some facts about their origin, let's briefly discuss human race relations problems, especially racism. There's nothing wrong with equal racism because racism is a fact of life that exists by nature in the sense that nature produced different human races that look different and have different racial natures. Of course, these facts presuppose racism by nature. Racism is wrong, however, if it is one-sided racism, like some members of the Caucasian race is one-sided racism. Like some members of the Caucasian race practice racism. Equal racism exists when a member or members of an ethnic race honors his or her own race as being a separate and different entity from other ethnic races, but has the intelligence to do nothing to members of other ethnic races that he or she would not want done to self or other members of his or her own race. Okay? On the other hand, one-sided racism or unequal racism exists when a member or members of an ethnic race honors his or her own race as being a separate and different entity from other ethnic races, but has not the intelligence to do nothing to members of other races that he or she would not want done to himself or other members of his or own race. Let it be remembered always, let it be known. All right? Listen to reason. Mr. and Mrs. Ethiopian, by race, a large part of the solution to one-sided racism is knowledge on the subject and practicing what you know. Firstly, we must understand the nature of the problem by knowing that it is basically spiritual and religious in the form of evil spells and ignorance in all its forms and deal with it accordingly. And this is one main reason why this writer approaches our problems of the Ethiopian race from an educational, philosophical, and spiritual perspective. Secondly, we must do what is in our power to solve our problems and start depending on other ethnic races to solve our problems for us, because either they are the racial problem or have enough problems of their own. Yet help in good faith by the human race is always welcome and greatly appreciated. Thirdly, one vital and most important thing that is in our power to do is this: start trying to change the members of other ethnic races to be like what we think they should or wish them to be. Instead, we Ethiopians by race must change ourselves to how we must be in order to cope with our problems, and primary step is regaining our own true culture, aided and spearheaded by Nupu and Noon, the powers and science of liberation, justice, and equality. Fourth, but not forgotten, we Africans by nature must unite ourselves mentally, spiritually, economically, and physically when possible and practical with our racial relative in our land of origin, motherland Africa, like other races do toward their home base country for their own survival and well-being. Let it be remembered always and let it be known. All right. Listen to reason. We black people as an ethnic race are still in mental captivity as well as spiritual and religious bondage, and we must not allow ourselves to slip back into physical captivity. Therefore, as already emphasized, we must embrace our own true culture new now and broaden and tighten our ties with our racial members in motherland called Africa, like Jews do with Israel and other Caucasians do in Europe and North America. Racial bigots and one-sided races publicly degrade themselves and demonstrate just how ignorant they are about ancient history and their own past when they publicly disparage and defame members of the Ethiopian race, the race who gave original and true culture to the world, and the race whose genuine hospitality and benign nature their ancestors took advantage of. Let it be remembered always, let it be known. Listen to reason. In the light of facts, past and also present, racial bigots and one-sided races likewise publicly illustrate just how unintelligent they are, and also how their ignorance and stupidity make them look wicked and worse, while the people they slander and vilify keep looking bigger and better. If racial bigots make themselves tick, knew what drives themselves and make themselves tick, they would not be so proud of themselves. Like the culture of other ethnic races, the true culture of the Ethiopian race gives us kinky-haired people the power base of knowledge, understanding and wisdom by nature necessary and required for our own spiritual power for self-protection as an ethnic and human race with process and progress towards sufficient economic provision and natural principles. Let it be remembered, let it be known. This is the last one. Verse 230. Listen to reason. As the writer continues this topic on human races, he shall attempt to clarify the important points of the subject that might not yet be comprehended by the reader. The planetary nation, all human beings on planet Earth, is classified and divided into three major ethnic human races according to universe science, and they are the Takono race, the mankind race, and the Mongoloid race. The Takono race, all people indeed who grow genuinely kinky hair on their heads by nature, is divided into 9 subdivision races and their branches, descending from the original 9 races. The universe nation of flesh and blood gods and goddesses who inhabit the top half of the smack circle of order during the existence of the top half. These original gods and goddesses are the original ancestors of the Ethiopian race.
Sipping. Smacks? What's up? What's that smack circle?
Yeah, it stands for space, matter, and time.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And the Takono race and its branches who are the results of the gods and goddesses having organic sex intercourse at point 6 west, the beginning of evolution and the death cycle. See figure 6 in the preceding topic. Although the gods and goddesses had not had physical sex intercourse before, let it be remember always and let it be known.